The market was crowded with voices, footsteps, and the smell of food rising in the air. Stalls stood side by side, filled with fruits, glowing drinks, and strange machines from faraway worlds. People moved fast, traders shouted for attention, and guards kept watch. In the middle of the crowd, a young alien girl stood frozen, her small hand holding a piece of fruit. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, and her eyes wide with fear. "Thief!" a trader shouted, pointing at her with anger. The word spread quickly like fire. More voices joined, some laughing, some angry, all aimed at her. Guards stepped forward, their armor shining under the market lights. They grabbed their weapons, ready to drag her away. The girl shook her head again and again, her voice weak, words broken. No steal. Not steal. But nobody cared. To the crowd, her voice meant nothing. She looked thin, almost starved, her hands trembling as she tried to speak. People threw harsh words at her, calling her a liar, a beggar, a thief who deserved no mercy. A rotten fruit hit her shoulder, thrown from the back of the crowd. She winced, but did not cry. Her eyes searched for help, but every face turned away or glared at her with hate. A human stood nearby, silent at first, watching the scene. His eyes studied her closely. He noticed how her fingers shook, how her ribs showed under her clothes, how her lips were dry like she had not eaten in days. She looked less like a thief and more like someone who was simply trying to survive. The human's jaw tightened as he heard the crowd's jeers grow louder. The guards moved closer, their heavy boots striking the ground. One grabbed her arm roughly, making her stumble. She gasped in pain, her frightened eyes filling with despair. The guard lifted a metal rod, ready to strike if she resisted. Around them, the crowd shouted, "Punish her! Teach her a lesson!" Before the rod came down, the human's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Stop!" The single word cut through the noise of the market. Everyone turned their heads in surprise. The guards paused, confused, as the human stepped forward and placed himself between them and the girl. His face was calm but firm, his eyes sharp like steel. "She didn't steal," he said, his voice steady. The crowd murmured in shock. A few laughed at the sight of a human defending an alien beggar. Others frowned, their anger now directed at him too. "What do you know, human?" someone shouted. "She's stolen before." Another spat on the ground. "She's a liar, and now you're lying for her." The guards narrowed their eyes at him. "Move aside," one growled, tightening his grip on the rod. "This is not your fight." The human didn't move. His boots stayed firm on the ground, his arms slightly spread as if shielding her. The girl stared up at him in disbelief, her mouth open, but no words coming. Yet she had not expected anyone to stand for her, not here, not ever. Her wide eyes glistened under the harsh lights of the market. The guard stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "If you stand with her, then you stand against the law." The human's lips pressed into a hard line. The crowd leaned forward, waiting to see what he would do. Many expected him to step back to save himself, but his body did not move an inch. His gaze locked on the guard, unafraid. "If the law punishes the innocent," he said coldly, "then it is not justice." Gasps rose from the crowd. Some looked uneasy, others enraged. The girl's knees shook, and she almost fell, but she steadied herself against his arm. His presence felt like a shield she had never known. The guards exchanged glances, unsure whether to push forward or hold back. The merchant who had first accused her shouted angrily, "She took my fruit! I saw her!" His face was red, his voice filled with fury. The human bent down, picked up the fallen fruit from the ground, and held it high for all to see. The skin was torn, and it looked like it had rolled away before she even touched it. "You call this stealing?" he asked, his voice loud enough to silence the crowd. "This? Look at her. She is starving. She is weak. You think she came here to cheat you? No. She came here because she has nothing, and you treat her like a criminal." The marketplace went quiet for a moment, the air heavy with tension. The girl stared at him as if she could not believe his words. Her throat moved, trying to form a sound, but only silence came out. Then, the crowd began to murmur again. Some shook their heads, unwilling to listen. Others lowered their eyes, uneasy at the truth. The guards' grips on their weapons tightened. The merchant hissed, "She is a thief, and now you're her accomplice." The human straightened his back, his face set. His hand reached slowly for the girl's trembling one, holding it firmly. Gasps spread again at the sight. The alien girl clung to him with desperate strength, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time, she felt a wall between herself and the hatred of the crowd. The guards raised their rods, their decision clear. "Both of you come with us," one commanded. The human did not release her hand. His voice carried once more, firm and unshaken. "If you take her, then you take me too." The crowd erupted, half cheering the guards, half whispering in doubt. Suspense filled the air, every second stretching longer. The alien girl pressed closer to him, her small frame shaking, her eyes wide with fear and something new, hope. The market lights flickered above, and for a heartbeat, silence ruled. Everyone waited for the next move, their breath caught in their throats. The human stood tall, her only defender, against a world that wanted her broken. The guard's eyes narrowed, and the metal rods lifted higher. The crowd shouted louder, some demanding punishment, others jeering at the human for interfering. The air felt heavy, as if violence was about to break loose. The human glanced at the alien girl beside him, her thin body trembling, her frightened eyes begging him for help. He made a decision in that moment. Without warning, he grabbed her hand tightly and pulled her forward. "Run!" he shouted. The girl gasped, her weak legs stumbling as he dragged her through the narrow path between stalls. The crowd roared in surprise. Guards shouted commands and gave chase. Boots pounded the ground, metal clanged, and angry voices filled the air. The human pushed past startled traders, knocking baskets aside, ignoring curses. Behind them, the guards' heavy armor crashed against wooden stands as they forced their way through. The girl's lungs burned, her breath coming in short gasps. She had not eaten enough to run far. Her steps faltered, and she nearly fell. The human caught her arm and pulled her up, urging her to keep moving. "Don't stop," he said firmly. She stumbled again, but his grip never loosened. Every time she thought she would fall, he pulled her back to her feet. They raced down an alley, shadows stretching long against the walls. Patrol drones buzzed above, their lights sweeping the streets. "There!" one of the guards shouted. The drones swooped lower, alarms blaring. The girl flinched, her heart pounding, certain they would be caught. The human yanked open a metal door and pulled her inside. They hurried through a dark corridor, dust rising with every step. The building smelled of rust and decay. He shoved another door open, and they tumbled into an abandoned warehouse. The vast space was filled with broken crates and shattered glass. Light streamed weakly through cracks in the ceiling. They hid behind a pile of old metal sheets, both of them breathing hard. The girl clutched her chest, gasping for air, her face pale with exhaustion. Sweat rolled down her forehead as she looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. "Why? You help?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The human leaned against the wall, still catching his breath. His eyes softened as he looked at her, but he said nothing. He didn't know the answer himself. Something inside him had moved when he saw her treated like less than nothing, and he couldn't stand by. His silence stretched, but his gaze told her what words could not. Her hands trembled as she pressed them together. She had lived her whole life hearing only hate, suspicion, and cruel laughter. No one had ever stepped in front of her. No one had ever pulled her away from danger. She could not understand why he, a stranger, would do such a thing. She whispered again, "Why? Risk for me?" The human shook his head slowly. He still didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of cloth. He handed it to her so she could wipe her face. She took it hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his, and for a moment she froze. That tiny gesture felt warmer than anything she had known in years. Outside, the sound of boots echoed faintly. Guards were still searching the area. The girl's body tensed, fear returning quickly. She curled against the wall, clutching the cloth, her large alien eyes glistening. The human pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay silent. They listened together. The sound of footsteps grew closer, then faded again. A patrol drone buzzed past the broken windows, its light briefly sweeping through the warehouse. The girl held her breath, her small hand clutching his sleeve. He stayed still, calm, his presence steady like a shield. After long minutes, the noise outside drifted away. The girl slowly relaxed, though her grip on him did not loosen. Her voice trembled when she spoke again. "They still hunt me." The human turned his head toward her. His eyes searched hers. There was fear there, but also something else, a faint glow of hope that frightened her more than the guards did. She had never hoped before, because hope was dangerous. Hope led only to disappointment. Yet she could not stop herself from clinging to him. She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. Her breathing steadied little by little. He watched her in silence, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders curled as if always expecting a blow. She looked fragile, as though the world had already broken her too many times. The warehouse was quiet now, but the danger was not gone. At any moment, the guards could return. Still, for the first time that day, the girl felt safe. She was hidden in the shadows, and someone had chosen to stand with her instead of against her. Her hand was still in his. She realized it only when she felt the warmth of his palm against her cold skin. Her eyes opened slightly, looking down at their joined hands. He didn't let go, and she didn't pull away. She couldn't. Something inside her told her that if she let go, the world outside would swallow her again. She swallowed hard, her voice so soft it was almost a breath. Not understand. Why you do this? The human finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Because it was right. Her chest tightened at the words. Simple, clear, without doubt. She wanted to ask more, but her throat closed. Tears pricked her eyes, and she turned her face away, not wanting him to see. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. The echo of boots returned faintly outside, pulling them both back into the present. The human's eyes narrowed. He knew they couldn't stay in the warehouse forever. The girl's hand squeezed his without her realizing it, fear rising again. He glanced at her, then nodded firmly. "We'll find another way," he said quietly. Her lips parted as she looked at him, shocked by his certainty. In her world, there was never another way. Yet when she saw the determination in his face, she wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe him. The warehouse grew darker as the evening sun faded. Shadows wrapped around them, hiding them deeper. The guards' voices echoed in the distance, but for now, they were safe. She rested against the wall, still holding his hand, refusing to let go. She did not understand who he was or why he had chosen her, but she knew one thing clearly. From that moment on, she could not leave his side. The warehouse was quiet, except for the sound of their breathing. Dust floated in the air, moving like tiny sparks whenever the weak light from the cracks touched it. The girl sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her thin arms wrapped around herself. Her stomach growled loudly, and she lowered her head in shame, afraid he might be angry at her hunger. The human watched her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a ration bar. He held it out without saying a word. Her eyes widened, as if she thought it was a trick. Slowly, she reached for it, her hands trembling. When she finally touched it, she pulled it back quickly, waiting for him to snatch it away. But he didn't. His hand stayed open, steady, patient. She took the bar carefully and held it close like it was treasure. With small bites, she began to eat, chewing fast as though the food might vanish if she waited too long. The human sat nearby, leaning against the cold wall. His eyes studied her as she ate, noticing the way her cheeks hollowed, the way her hands shook with every bite. She was starving, not lying, not pretending. She was a creature fighting simply to survive. When she finished, she licked the wrapper as if no crumb could go to waste. Then she whispered, her voice rough but soft, "Thank you." The words sounded strange, almost broken, but filled with sincerity. Silence stretched between them for a while. The girl lowered her head, but then slowly began to speak again. Her words were broken, but he understood. She told him she had no family. Her people were scattered, driven out, marked as outcasts. Traders cheated them, guards hunted them, and citizens spat at them. No one gave them work, no one sold them food. Whenever she tried to beg, people kicked her away. Whenever she tried to pick up scraps, they shouted thief. Her hands tightened around her knees as she spoke. She explained that she had once lived with others like her, but they had been captured one by one. Some were taken by merchants, others disappeared in the night. She was left alone, too small to fight, too weak to defend herself. All she could do was run, hide, and search for something to eat. Her voice cracked when she said, "No one see me, only see thief." She pressed her forehead against her knees, hiding her face. The human's chest tightened as he listened. He thought back to the market, to the hatred in the crowd's eyes. It was easy for them to call her a criminal. They never cared about the truth. He stayed quiet, but his silence was not cold. It was heavy, filled with thought. The girl slowly lifted her head and looked at him with those wide, alien eyes. She seemed confused by his quietness. Most people shouted at her, cursed her, or pushed her away. He only listened. That was something she had never known. After a long pause, he asked gently, "Why don't you leave this city?" His voice was calm, but curiosity edged it. If life here was only pain, why stay? The girl froze. Her face turned pale, and her lips pressed together tightly. Her hands trembled again, but this time not from hunger. She looked around the shadows as if expecting something to come out. Finally, she whispered, her voice low and frightened. "Cannot. Someone hunts me." The human leaned forward slightly. "Who?" he asked. Her eyes darted toward the cracked windows as though the name itself might call danger. "Merchant Lord," she whispered. Her words shook with fear. "He say I belong to him. I escape." She swallowed hard, her body curling smaller, almost vanishing into herself. "If he find me, chain, beat, sell." The human's fists tightened at her words. He could see the scars on her thin arms, faint marks that told a story she hadn't spoken. She was not lying. She had escaped a nightmare, and now the nightmare still chased her. Silence filled the warehouse again, but it was no longer calm. The shadows seemed darker, the air colder. The human looked at her and saw not just a girl, but someone who had been broken by cruelty again and again. Yet even in her brokenness, she had survived. The girl's eyes lifted to meet his, searching for something, doubt, disgust, or anger. But his gaze was steady, not turning away. For a moment she felt exposed, as though he could see every scar, every wound inside her. She almost wished he would leave so she wouldn't feel so weak. Yet at the same time, the thought of him leaving filled her with dread. She hugged her knees tighter, rocking slightly, and whispered, "If stay with me, you danger too." Her words were meant to push him away, to warn him, but her voice carried sadness. She expected him to leave, like everyone always did. The human leaned back against the wall, his eyes still locked on her. "Danger doesn't matter," he said quietly. Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken like that before. People only cared about themselves, their safety, their profit. But this human spoke as if her life mattered, as if her suffering meant something. Her chest tightened painfully, and she turned her face away to hide the tears that threatened to fall. The silence between them grew heavy again, but it was different now. It was no longer empty. It was filled with unspoken trust, fragile and new. The girl shifted closer without realizing it, her shoulder brushing against his arm. She felt warmth there, warmth she had not known in a long time. Outside, faint voices echoed. The sound of guards searching still lingered in the night. The girl stiffened, but the human didn't move. He sat steady, his presence like a wall against the darkness. She clung to that feeling, her heart beating fast. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe in something small but powerful, that maybe she was not alone anymore. The silence of the warehouse broke with a loud crash. The metal door slammed open, and heavy boots stormed inside. The girl's head jerked up, her wide eyes filled with terror. The human rose to his feet instantly, his body tense, ready. Shadows of armored guards filled the doorway, their weapons glinting under the faint light. "There they are!" one shouted. The girl pressed herself against the wall, trembling so hard her small body almost shook apart. The human grabbed the nearest piece of metal he could find, a broken pipe, heavy and rough in his hands. He stepped in front of her, placing himself like a shield between her and the guards. The guards advanced, their boots pounding on the cracked floor. "Give us the girl," one ordered. "Step aside, human. She is property of the merchant lord." The human's grip on the pipe tightened. His voice came out low, steady, filled with fire. "She belongs to no one." The guards growled, raising their weapons. The first swung his rod at the human. Metal clashed against metal as the human blocked with the pipe. The sound rang through the empty warehouse. The girl gasped, covering her mouth with her hands, watching as the fight broke out. The human dodged another strike, swinging the pipe hard. It smashed into a guard's chest plate, forcing him back. Another guard lunged, and the human twisted, barely avoiding the blow. His heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through his veins, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was fighting not for himself, but for the terrified girl behind him. The guards surrounded him. One struck his shoulder, and pain shot through him, but he didn't fall. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, swinging with all his strength. The pipe cracked against another helmet, sending the guard stumbling. Sparks flew as weapons clashed again and again. The girl's body shook with every sound. She wanted to run, but her legs froze. Fear gripped her so tightly she couldn't move. She pressed her hands to her ears, but she couldn't block out the noise of the battle, the grunts, the crashes, the echo of violence. Tears filled her eyes, but she could not look away. One guard finally swung low, knocking the pipe from the human's hands. It clattered across the floor, rolling into the shadows. The human staggered back, unarmed now, his breath ragged. The guards closed in, their weapons raised. The girl cried out, "No!" Her voice cracked, desperate but powerless. At that moment, the human lunged forward with his bare fists. He slammed into the nearest guard, knocking him off balance. Grabbing the man's weapon, he twisted it free and swung with all his strength. The guard fell, crashing against the crates. The others hesitated for a moment, but then charged again. The fight raged, louder, harsher. The human's arms ached, his body bruised, but his determination only grew. He refused to fall, not while the girl depended on him. He blocked, struck, and shoved with all he had left, forcing space between them and the corner where she hid. The girl's chest heaved. Something inside her screamed that she couldn't let him fight alone. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled, too weak. She wanted to move, to help, but terror pinned her to the wall. Still, her eyes never left him. She had never seen anyone fight for her, never seen anyone risk everything to keep her safe. The warehouse window shattered as a rod slammed into it. Glass rained down, scattering across the floor. The human used the moment, grabbing the girl's hand and pulling her forward. "Come on," he shouted. She stumbled, nearly falling, but he held her firmly. Together, they ran toward the broken window. The guards shouted behind them, racing to block their way. The human swung the stolen weapon to keep them back, then pushed the girl through the gap first. The shards cut her arms, but she didn't stop. She landed hard outside, the cold night air hitting her lungs. The human followed, diving through the shattered frame just as a guard's rod swung past his back. They fell into the darkness together, rolling onto the dirt. The sound of guards shouting echoed behind them. Before they could stand, bright lights flashed above. Patrol drones had spotted them. Alarms screamed in the night, and beams of white light cut through the shadows. "There! Catch them!" voices shouted. The human grabbed the girl's hand again, pulling her to her feet. They ran through the narrow alley, their breaths loud, hearts pounding. The city's walls rose around them like a maze, every corner filled with danger. The girl stumbled, her legs failing, but the human pulled her up again and again. His grip never loosened, his pace never slowed. Behind them, guards poured out of the warehouse, Pat chasing fast. The sound of boots grew louder, the light of drones brighter. The girl gasped, fear choking her. She could not keep up. Her knees buckled and she fell hard. The human stopped instantly, lifting her into his arms without hesitation. She was light, too light, like a child starved of food. He carried her as he ran, his breath burning, his muscles screaming, but his will unshaken. They reached the river at the edge of the city. The water rushed fast, dark and cold. The guards closed in, their weapons ready. The girl clung to his neck, her eyes wide with terror. "No escape," she whispered, her voice broken. The human looked at the water, then at the army of guards behind them. His decision came quickly. He tightened his grip on her. "Hold on," he said firmly. Before she could protest, he jumped. Together they plunged into the icy river. The shock of cold struck them both like knives. The water swallowed their cries, pulling them under. The girl's body stiffened in his arms, her breath lost in the freezing current. The river carried them away from the shouts and the lights. The guards' voices faded as the water roared louder. The human kicked hard, fighting to keep both their heads above the surface. The girl gasped and coughed, clutching him tightly, terrified of being swept away. They were carried far from the city, the lights shrinking behind them. At last, the current pushed them to the muddy shore. The human crawled out first, pulling her with him. Both collapsed on the ground, drenched, shivering, gasping for air. The girl clung to him, her small body shaking violently from the cold and fear. She pressed her face into his chest, refusing to let go. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, holding her close. She would not leave him, not now, not ever again. The night air was cold as they moved away from the river. Their clothes clung to their bodies, dripping water with every step. The girl shivered, her teeth chattering, but she refused to let go of his arm. The human guided her carefully, his eyes searching for a place to rest. At last, he saw dim lights in the distance. A small village stood at the edge of the fields, its roofs low and its paths narrow. Smoke rose from chimneys, and faint voices carried on the wind. The human led her there, hoping the villagers would offer shelter. As they entered, people turned their heads to look. Farmers paused in their work, women stopped at their doors, and children pointed with curious eyes. The girl lowered her head at once, hiding her face behind her tangled hair. She had seen these stares before, hard, suspicious, filled with judgment. Her hands clutched the human's sleeve tighter, her heart pounding with dread. A man from the village stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Who is she?" he asked sharply. Others gathered, their whispers rising quickly. Some muttered, "Isn't that the thief from the city?" Another added, "She brings trouble wherever she goes." The words spread fast, and soon the crowd's murmurs turned into disapproval. The human stood firm. "She's with me," he said clearly, his voice steady. "She needs food and rest." But the villagers shook their heads. One woman crossed her arms and spat on the ground. "That creature is cursed. Everyone knows she steals." Another old man sneered, "If you keep her here, you bring danger to us all. Guards will come." The girl's shoulders hunched lower. She wished she could disappear, melt into the earth. She had heard all of this before, too many times. She expected the human to let go of her hand, to leave her behind now that the village had spoken against her. But instead, his grip only grew tighter. He raised his voice, loud enough for all to hear. "She is not what you say. She is no thief. She is starving, hunted, and treated like dirt, but she has done nothing to deserve your hate." The villagers fell into uneasy silence. Some looked away, ashamed, while others only glared harder. Still, no one stepped forward to help. The human guided the girl past them, ignoring their whispers. They reached a small fire pit at the edge of the village, and where no one stopped them. He sat down with her there, his eyes calm though he could feel the weight of the villagers' stares from behind. That night, he lit a small fire. The girl sat close, her thin frame shaking from the cold. She stared into the flames, the light flickering across her alien features. She did not speak for a long time, afraid to break the silence. At last, her voice came soft and fragile. "Why? Defend me again?" The human glanced at her. The fire reflected in his eyes as he answered simply, "Because no one else will." Her breath caught at the words. They were plain, without decoration, but they carried a strength she had never known. Her chest tightened painfully, and she felt tears sting her eyes. She turned her head away quickly, afraid he might see her weakness. She bit her lip hard, trying to keep the tears from falling, but they came anyway, rolling silently down her cheeks. She had lived her life unseen, unloved, treated like nothing more than a shadow in the streets. But here was someone who stood against an entire market, against guards, against a village full of doubt, and all for her. She did not understand it, but she felt the truth of his words deep inside her. The fire crackled between them. The human handed her another ration bar. This time, she did not hesitate as before. She accepted it and ate slowly, her eyes watching him from the corner of her vision. He sat steady, silent, as though protecting her without even moving. When the villagers walked past, they whispered again. Some looked disgusted, others fearful, but the human never wavered. His body language told everyone the same thing. She was under his protection. No one dared come too close. The girl noticed this and realized something strange. For once, she was not alone. She was not an easy target anymore. Later, as the fire burned low, she lay down beside it, curling close to the warmth. The human kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the village. The girl's breathing slowed, but she did not fall fully asleep. Her mind was restless, turning over his words again and again, because no one else will. The sentence replayed inside her like a heartbeat. Each time she thought about it, her chest felt heavy and warm at once. She had always believed she was worthless, but to him, she was worth defending. That thought both frightened and comforted her. The night deepened. The wind carried the sounds of the village, the bark of a dog, the low murmur of voices behind closed doors, the creak of wooden shutters. The girl shifted closer to the fire, and without thinking, she also shifted closer to him. Her small hand brushed his sleeve again. She froze, worried he might pull away, but he did not. Instead, he remained still, as if letting her know she was safe to be near him. She closed her eyes, exhaustion finally pulling her into sleep. But even in her dreams, her hand stayed against his sleeve. She could not let go, not after everything that had happened. The human looked down at her as she slept, her face soft under the glow of the fire. He saw the scars, the dirt, the signs of her suffering, but he also saw the quiet strength that had carried her this far. He knew the danger was not over. The merchant lord was still searching. The guards would come again. The villagers might turn hostile, but he also knew he would not step aside. Not now. Not ever. The flames burned low, and the stars spread across the sky. In the distance, the fields rustled under the cold night wind. The human sat awake, guarding her while she slept, while the whispers of the village faded into silence. And though the world still called her a thief, in that moment, beside the fire, she felt something she had never felt before: belonging. The morning sun rose over the village, its light spilling across the fields. The girl woke slowly, her body stiff from sleeping on the ground. She blinked against the brightness, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she felt the warmth of the small fire's ashes beside her and saw the human sitting near, his eyes sharp and watchful. He had not slept much. He had stayed awake, keeping guard while she rested. When the villagers began their day, their stares returned. Whispers followed her every step as she moved with the human. Some muttered about curses, others about the guards who would surely come. Children hid behind their parents, peeking at her with wide, fearful eyes. The girl lowered her head again, shame burning her cheeks. She wished she could vanish, wished the ground would swallow her before more hate could reach her ears. By afternoon, the sound of hooves and clanking metal echoed from the road. Dust rose as a caravan approached. The villagers froze, their faces pale, and hurried to gather in the square. At the front of the caravan rode a man with jeweled armor and cold eyes. He was tall, proud, and cruel, the merchant lord. His soldiers marched behind him, armed and merciless. The girl's breath caught in her throat, her entire body going cold. She whispered, her voice breaking, "He find me." The villagers rushed to greet the merchant lord with bows and nervous smiles. They pointed quickly toward the girl, eager to free themselves of blame. "She is here," one man said loudly. "We kept watch, just as you wanted." Another villager added, "Take her and leave us in peace." The girl's heart sank. Her eyes darted to the human, terrified he might step aside now that the entire village had turned against her. Her body shook as the merchant lord dismounted, his boots striking the earth with heavy thuds. He looked at her with a cruel smile. "So," he said, his voice smooth but sharp, "my runaway pet hides here." The girl whimpered, stepping back, but soldiers moved to block her escape. The villagers nodded along, whispering approval, some muttering that this would save them from trouble. The human stepped forward, his body a wall between her and the soldiers. His voice was steady and cold. "She is not your pet. She belongs to no one." The merchant lord's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, his pride stung by defiance. "Careful, human. You stand against me. You stand against power greater than you can imagine." He waved his hand, and soldiers raised their weapons. The villagers began to shout, urging the human to step aside. "Do not fight him! He will destroy us!" "Let him take her. She is nothing but trouble." Their words came like knives, pressing the girl lower, making her curl into herself. She wanted to scream, to beg the human not to risk his life for her. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came out. The human didn't move. His voice carried over the crowd, louder than the merchant's threats, louder than the villagers' fear. "You treat her like an object, like a tool, like a slave. But she is alive. She feels. She suffers. And I will not let you take her." Gasps rose. The villagers stared in shock, unable to believe he dared challenge the merchant lord so openly. The merchant's face twisted with fury. "Seize him!" he roared. The soldiers advanced, weapons ready. The girl's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She could not stay frozen any longer. Her legs moved before she could think, and she ran forward. Instead of hiding behind him, she stepped in front of the human, her arms spread wide, her small frame shaking but firm. "Not again," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I not let you hurt him." The crowd gasped again, this time in disbelief. The alien girl who had always been weak, always been hunted, was now standing as a shield. The merchant lord laughed cruelly. You? Protect him? You cannot even protect yourself. He raised his hand to signal his soldiers. But the girl did not step back. She stood firm, her voice louder this time, filled with something stronger than fear. You chained me before. You beat me. You call me nothing, but he call me free. Her words shook the air, trembling but powerful. I stay with him. I fight with him. The human looked at her, shock in his eyes, but also pride. She had found strength she never knew she had, strength born from the bond they now shared. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder and stepped beside her. They faced the soldiers together, 2 against many, yet unbroken. The merchant lord snarled, "Then you will die together." He raised his arm and the soldiers charged. The villagers screamed and ran for cover. Dust rose as the soldiers rushed forward. The human's fists tightened, ready to fight with all he had. The girl trembled, fear still inside her, but she did not run. For the first time in her life, she chose to stand her ground. The clash came like thunder, weapons striking, voices shouting, chaos breaking the peace of the village. The girl screamed, but not in fear. This time, it was in defiance. The human fought at her side, and together they resisted the force that sought to break them. The villagers watched from their hiding places, their eyes wide. Some felt shame, others awe. The story they had believed for years, that she was only a thief, a burden, a curse, was unraveling before their eyes. They saw her not as a weak beggar, but as someone willing to fight, willing to protect, willing to stand against cruelty. The merchant lord's soldiers stumbled under the fury of the human strikes. Dust filled the air, shouts turned into cries of pain. The merchant lord himself stepped back, his cold eyes now filled with rage and disbelief. This was not the scene he expected. He had imagined an easy capture, but instead, he found resistance stronger than chains. The girl clung to the human's arm as the battle raged, her small voice whispering again and again, "I protect you. I protect you." The fight was not yet over, but the bond between them had already changed everything. She was no longer just the hunted girl, and he was no longer just her savior. Together, they had become something more, 2 souls defying the world that wanted them broken. The village square was filled with dust and screams. The human fought with every ounce of strength left in his body, striking and blocking, forcing the soldiers back. His arms ached, his breathing was heavy, and bruises marked his skin, but his spirit never broke. Beside him, the alien girl clung to his sleeve, refusing to leave his side. Every time he staggered, she cried out, pulling him upright, begging him not to fall. The soldiers, though many, began to falter. Their attacks grew sloppy as they faced not just a fighter, but a man with unshakable resolve. Each strike he delivered carried not only strength but meaning, the promise he would never let her be taken again. One soldier lunged at him with a blade, but the human twisted, slammed his fist into the man's jaw, and sent him sprawling to the ground. Another came from behind, but the girl screamed a warning, giving him just enough time to turn and defend. Together, they pushed forward step by step. The villagers, who had hidden in fear, began to peek from doorways and fences. They watched in disbelief as the human and the girl stood against the merchant lord's forces. Whispers spread quickly. He fights for her. He stands against them all. Why would he risk his life for her? For years, they had believed the girl was cursed, a thief, a burden. Now they saw her in a different light, not as a shadow, but as someone worth fighting for. The merchant lord's face twisted with rage. His soldiers were falling one by one, humiliated by a single human and a girl he had once called worthless. He shouted angrily, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You dare stand against me? You dare defy the order of this world?" His hand tightened on his jeweled sword, and for the first time, he stepped into the fight himself. The villagers gasped. The merchant lord was feared not only for his wealth, but also for his skill in battle. His sword gleamed under the sunlight as he advanced, each step heavy with pride and cruelty. The human tightened his stance, gripping a fallen soldier's weapon, ready to meet him. The girl's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break. The first clash rang out like thunder. Steel struck steel, sparks flying. The merchant lord pressed forward with practiced swings, each blow heavier than the last. The human blocked, his arms shaking under the weight, but he did not give ground. The girl screamed each time the blade came close, her hands gripping his arm as though her will alone could give him strength. The fight dragged on, the sound of steel echoing across the village. Dust rose around them, blinding some of the crowd, but everyone could hear the fury in each strike. The human's body was battered, but he fought with something the merchant lord did not have: conviction. Every time he thought of stepping back, he saw the girl's terrified eyes, and it gave him power to stand again. Finally, in a moment of weakness, the merchant lord swung too wide. The human seized the chance. With all his strength, he struck the lord's arm, sending the jeweled sword flying across the dirt. Gasps filled the air as the weapon clattered away. The merchant lord stumbled back, shock and disbelief on his face. For the first time, he looked small, powerless. The villagers erupted in shouts. Some cheered, others stared in silence, unable to believe what they had seen. The human lowered the weapon in his hands, his chest rising and falling heavily. He did not finish the merchant lord, though he could have. Instead, he turned his gaze on the crowd, his voice steady but sharp. "This man lied to you. He enslaved, he abused, he hunted the weak. And you believed him. You turned on a girl who did nothing but survive." The villagers lowered their eyes, shame burning in their faces. The truth hit them harder than any weapon. They had been blind, choosing fear over compassion. The girl, who had once been spat at and cursed, now stood before them as proof of their failure. The merchant lord tried to rise, but his soldiers did not move to help him. They looked broken, defeated, unwilling to fight further. Some even dropped their weapons, backing away slowly. The balance of power had shifted. The girl, trembling, stepped forward. Her voice shook but carried across the square. "You call me thief. You call me curse. But he call me free." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice grew stronger with each word. "He fight when no one else would. He see me when you look away, and I will never leave him." The villagers' hearts stirred. Some began to nod. Others whispered apologies under their breath. They saw not a thief, but a survivor, not a curse, but someone brave enough to stand beside her defender, even in the face of death. The human placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her trembling frame. His voice lowered, soft but filled with pride. "You are not alone anymore." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she leaned against him. For the first time, she believed the words. The loneliness that had been her only companion for years began to fade, replaced by something new: hope. The merchant lord, defeated and humiliated, was dragged away by his own soldiers. The villagers watched silently, knowing his power over them was broken. No one cheered his name. No one mourned his loss. The shadow he had cast over them was gone. When the dust settled, the villagers approached slowly. An old woman stepped forward first, placing bread into the girl's hands. Her voice trembled with guilt. "I was wrong. Forgive me." Others followed, offering food, water, and quiet words of regret. The girl stood frozen, unable to believe it. She looked up at the human, as if to ask if it was real. He nodded gently, his eyes calm. That night, they sat together by another fire. But this time, the village did not whisper against her. Instead, they gathered near, listening to her voice, watching her with new eyes. The girl leaned against the human, her hand clutching his as though she would never let go. She whispered to him, her words soft, full of emotion. "You defended me when no one else did. Now I stay. Always." The human looked at her, silent, but his hand tightened around hers in answer. Above them, the stars spread wide, brighter than ever. For the first time in her life, the girl felt not hunted, not cursed, not alone. She felt free, and she knew she would never walk the world without him again.